Guys, thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's lovely to see so much of the EU bubble in the same room. You have trainees, member of the parliament, head of units, directors, lobbyists, journalists. It's just heartwarming. I tried to explain briefly what was the idea of the evening, which is bringing cool people together. And I think you're all here because you love two things, the European Union and memes. So tonight we are going to try to make an experiment, and we will be try to look back at the history of the European Union of the last 5 years, only through memes. So at the end of this evening, you will have enough of memes. It will be a memes indigestion. For those that just moved here, maybe you feel a bit like this, it's a bit of a dysfunctional environment, and this evening is an opportunity to show that, there are cool and funny people. You just have to know where to look. As for me, I'm Fabio Mauri, and I'm a traveler, basically, and to support my travels, I work as IT consultant, communication consultant, photographer. I was born and raised in Italy, as my accent probably suggests.
Really?
But I had the chance to live in many European countries, in Austria, in Germany, in Belgium, in Estonia. I spent a lot of time in the Czech Republic, in Hungary, countries I love, and that's how I learn to appreciate the beauty of our continent and the languages we have. And I met a lot of amazing people in my travels, and I am still in touch with them. So for me, this event is like, a big Erasmus party, trying to keep the light on in Europe. We know it's tough days coming up, and it's not going to be any better. And maybe you know my personal communication project, the Directorate General for Memes and Satire. I started it in 2018, so it's been 7 years, not bad. And the idea was to make the EU relatable, to make the EU cool, to talk about the EU, to enhance the European public sphere, as somebody would say and write. And it's active on the main social media. There is a cool website. All of this without any budget. In 7 years, it achieved and managed to change a bit the way we do communication. When I was still hiding, I remember being in meetings where people were discussing, they didn't know that it was me doing DigiMeme, and they were like, oh, but if we publish this shit, we are gonna end up on DigiMeme. And then I was like, okay, things are changing little by little. Yes, it's important that we are laughing, because the next years are gonna be tough. We're gonna have to go through this shit all the time, continuously. We need to stick together. We need to keep being creative. We need to at least try to fight these people with our creativity and our energy. We are gonna start with the presentation. Just a word of caution. It's satire, so it might be that some of the memes I'm going to show tonight will, talk about a project you really care, a person you really care about, a politician that has inspired you. It's all right. We are just, trying to have some fun. In case there are Daily Mail journalists in the room, I'd like to point out that DigiMeme is not an official page of the European Union. It does not represent what I'm going to say tonight. Is just my personal opinion of Fabio Mauri, European citizen. Cool. We go back in time now. Please concentrate. You're thinking, okay, 2019, it's summer, just, it's a bit warmer outside, and we just finished having the elections, and we are all awaiting to know who is going to be, the next big bosses. Brussels is full of also new MEPs. Some of them have a degree in EU law. Some others are more like, I heard about Brussels. Let's see what is happening there. We have Charles Michel becomes the European president of EUCO. We were, having great expectations. We have Christine Lagarde, president of the European Central Bank. We are still waiting for the president of the European Commission. There is a process called the Spitzenkandidaten in place, where the group that wins the elections will put his name forward to become president of the Commission. It didn't really happen because the EU leaders were thinking, okay, let's be creative. And finally, Ursula von der Leyen nominated. Some people are happy, some people are less happy. Definitely, Frans Timmermans was not so happy in that moment. But in a few weeks, we get to know the names of the new dream team of the European Commission. We are very proud. It's 48% female commissioners. Gender balance is important. At the same time, in Finland, you have also a new government where I think 80% were women. So it looked like we have more. It was a fun competition. At the same time, Boris Johnson becomes Prime Minister of United Kingdom, and yes, everybody congratulates. That's a real tweet, guys. It's real. It's not a photo composition. Yes. Some people love him. We have the same kind of boorish communication style. Some other people find him a bit, annoying and impolite. Everybody has his preferences. We reached 2020 full of hope. Myself, I thought 2020, I got a remote working contract, I will travel the world. It's funny. We start easily. We are negotiating still Brexit. After we gave them 1 year extension, finally we discuss about fish. We take all the fish as it was to be expected. Brexit is, the great success that we all knew it would have been. Great decision. We are talking about multilingualism. It's a French presidency. And yes, you start having the doubt that maybe for them multilingualism just means more French in the institution, but they don't want more Lithuanian or more Czech, and that's would be disappointing. So all in all, I'm happy we are still speaking in English. We have a new enfant terrible on the stage of the world. Greta Thunberg meeting the leaders of the world. Small talk, let's put it like this. Pointing out, okay, guys, we have a trouble with the weather. We have to take it seriously. Climate, the planet, it's important. All these enthusiasm a bit faded away, but still, at least it happened. Ursula von der Leyen makes it on the cover of Europolitan. And that's the fictional magazine that we publish every St. Valentine's Day. The next issue will be next week, and it's almost ready. Now imagine, I'm a very naive person, so when I met Ursula, I showed her this meme because I think it's really funny way to talk about European politics. So I was there to pitch her in 20 minutes a different approach to EU communication, and I thought, okay, I can add this great Europolitan. People loved it, and then she was reading. She reads with her fingers. You officials are the best in bed because they can make anything last ages. And then she stopped, and the moment she made this, break, I was thinking, shit, maybe that's not the best. The best meme you can show to a 66 years old president of the European Commission. I started having a bit sweat. Then she looked up at me, and I gave her, my koala face, like, hee. And she kind of smiled back, and I understood, okay, she's not going to ask the security to escort me out. I can continue to present my pitch. Yes, fun is over because people start coughing around us. It's 2020. At least the positive thing of COVID, we didn't go to Strasbourg for at least a few months. That was a good thing. Otherwise, yes, there is a pandemic going on. We realized that. So those that are laughing are the veterans. Yeah. So this is Martin Selmayr for the newcomers, a very powerful EU official once. He developed this great plan to stay in power forever. But he didn't plan that he's German, and von der Leyen is German, so you cannot have two Germans at very high positions. So in the end, he had to go to Austria as head of representation, and now he's ambassador at the Vatican. I'm sure Don Brown is gonna write some more books about him. We are facing COVID. Everybody tries to bring some positive vibe, because I don't know about you, I was really depressed, because imagine I'm a traveler and I couldn't travel, and the borders were closed, the regional borders were closed. It was a really difficult time, and it was nice that in the Commission we still try to to laugh about it. I mean, if you think this is a Commissioner Hahn wearing this kind of mask, it's not a composition, it's a real communication. I think it was a nice moment, and everybody was trying to try to help and see what we could do to solve the problem. Of course, some others took COVID as well. You know, I'm already a bit a tendency to autocracy. Maybe I can use COVID to get even more power. So back then, the Prime Minister of Hungary could rule by decree, which is funny, and also, you know, take over the last remain of freedom of press. But still, we were busy with other priorities, so it's understandable that EPP leaders had other problems. For example, money. There is economic crisis coming because everything is closed, roads are closed, shops are closed. We need to rebuild together, find resources, and yes, budget. Actually, a lot of negotiations, a lot of talk about money. There are different proposals. Somebody wants to have grants, somebody wants to have loans, and fortunately we find a way to get both somehow to create some resilience. So things look a bit smoother. The first Soteo of von der Leyen, our attempt to make Soteo a musical was turned down by SPP, but we made our version of the musical. You find it online if you're curious. On the other side of the Atlantic, there are new elections. We can still think about this good memory. This has been the second most successful meme I ever made. It was shared by Indian newspapers, and it was a small regional Indian newspaper, but you know, even if it's small, we're talking 20 million people reading it, so that went quite far. We end the year with Christmas. Those that are not laughing, unfortunately, you missed one of the best moments in the EU bubble. So basically, MEP from Fidesz, you know, a bit homophobic, traditional family party, had to climb out from a gay orgy in the middle of Brussels, and it was like, you know, quite a good memory, I see. 2021. It starts great. The US Congress is stormed by Trump supporters. And in that moment, I imagined, imagine they have to do it here. You know, it's like when the farmers come to Brussels to protest and the MEPs are all in Strasbourg. So, new US administration, we try to reconnect the ties. We have to explain once again what the European Union is and who should answer Henry Kissinger, God bless him, when he calls looking for Europe. Not always easy. But, well, EU leaders are going more often to the US. Of course, you can also get a free call. Why not, if you can? There is still a pandemic going on. We have vaccines. They started to develop. AstraZeneca is promising vaccines to everybody, to the UK, to the EU, to US. And apparently they only have actually, in the end, one box of vaccines that they promised to 3 players. So we try to be insistent and get the vaccines back. Thierry Breton was behaving like a spy back then. He managed to find out there is a shipment of vaccines leaving Rome to the UK. We can block it with Europol and keep the vaccines for us. Italy doesn't care if there is a pandemic or not. We still manage to have a government crisis. But with a twist, because the Prime Minister this time is a very competent person. It's a person who is a master of real economy. And now you can think about him whatever you want, but you all have autograph from Mario Draghi in your pocket. Find another Prime Minister like that. We have one of the best tweets by Pepe Borrell that he noticed that Russia does not want to seize the opportunity to have a more constructive dialogue with the EU. It was one of my favorite tweets. And this, I had the idea like, okay, why don't we imagine this very tweet through the centuries and imagine, okay, during the War of Troy, like, and this is like really, it was endless because then Berlin Monster chipped in and Martin Seltzer-Meyer chipped in. We all had the idea, like, okay, what if it's Star Wars universe? You know, there is this giant Death Star just appeared next to us. I hope they will seize the opportunity for us. So, yes, it's good that we can still laugh about it. Big breakup. Finally, after years of very dysfunctional relationship, Fidesz is kicked out from the EPP. It was about time. There are new elections in the Netherlands. Mark Rutte wins without any troubles. Nevertheless, he has a bit to lean to the right, which is where the next elections are going to go. Do you remember this? The Evergreen cargo ship was blocked in the Suez Canal, creating a ripple effect of delay that is still being worked on today. So everything was blocked, the shipment were blocked, and we were in the middle of a pandemic. Little by little, with some slow investigation, we noticed that probably there was some mismanagement of EU fund in the Czech Republic, but it's all right compared to the COVID cares. There is the Sofagate. There is the conference on the future of Europe. I didn't hear about this in the last year, I must say, but back then it was the thing that everybody was worried about. Especially it took 1 year to find 6 presidents for it, and yes, a big success. Finally, resilience facility, how it's called, we find an agreement to give money to everybody, and everybody is happy, except the frugal country, of course. And yes, every country finds a way to rebuild their economies thanks to the support of EU money. This is very beautiful. In Italy, we also use it to build new stadiums. In Estonia, they built new saunas on Rumu Lake. And every country found also a creative way to make life better. That's also important when you want to restart a whole country to have saunas and stadiums. I must say that was a good moment for me. I think in EU news, in every member state, you saw EU politicians more and more often. That was a great moment. Everybody knew, okay, Ursula, yeah, this strong lady that she's solving problems, yeah, more or less. And this created, I think, a good vibe towards the EU. In that moment, people thought, okay, after all, it's not too bad to coordinate all the efforts in a centralized way. And yes, it's good also to remember the positive things when they happen. So in that magic moment, there was like two months of hope. Then, of course, back then, we were worried about Janez Janša's tweet. It was the Slovenian presidency of the EU. And if you look back at how worried we were about what he's going to tweet, nowadays it's like, oh, yeah, that's a nice to have. Why give us more tweets like this? Of course, yes.
Nothing changed.
Well, maybe Poland a bit. Come on. Germany has a new government, a new chancellor even, and they published this picture. Of course, I added the Peaky Blinders, but that's really the picture they showed. It's very grunge. I think it will stay in history of political communication. Frau Merkel is like the only one. Frau Merkel is leaving after 16 years at power of the biggest and most powerful European nation. And there is this parade. It's called the Großen Zapfenstreich. It's the way that the military greet any personality that is leaving the country. The last pictures might not be from the actual parade. We reached 2022. We lose an important European, David Sassoli, former president of the European Parliament, dies. I like to remember him with this picture of destroying the wall, which is what we should always try to do. We are happy spring is coming. Finally, COVID is over. We can have a spring and summer of love. No ways fucking Putin decides to invade Ukraine. The only funny thing is that, all the great mastermind that were saying, no, he's a very rational man, he's not going to invade Ukraine, he's, a mastermind, a strategist, they have to change a bit ideas, they have to change t-shirts. Imagine von der Leyen like, fuck. One thing that goes well, is it possible, please? No way. So, there is a war. We have to decide, do we send troops, do we send prayers, do we send thoughts? And every leader has different opinions. what we know is best we can do is sanctions. I remember the idea of sanctions, like we start with small sanctions and then in case the situation escalates, we will go harder with sanctions. And I was like, okay, what else should happen to escalate the sanctions? NATO becomes an important say organization again. EU leaders are meeting, they exchange important questions, some more important than others. Still trying to communicate, but somehow the message doesn't go through. Now, we know that Germany gives a lot of aid and money, of course, but yeah, somehow that's not all you need. So the great Russian master strategies make so that within 2 months we have Finland and Sweden try to enter NATO. That's the longest border they have with the Russian Federation. Some journalists have a different take on this process, but funny. For Sweden, it's not so easy because they're very welcoming and apparently they host members of PKK, which in Turkey is considered a terrorist organization. So Erdogan is playing hard to get because he can oppose the joining of Sweden into NATO. In France, we have a presidential election. The two candidates are facing each other. Fortunately, Macron still managed to win. After 1 year and a few months, of course, the Italian government is over again. Mario Draghi is not appreciated. And so there will be another government crisis in Italy. Meanwhile, a new prime minister in the Czech Republic. And also the Czech Republic has the rotating presidency of the council. So there is a lot of leaders coming and leaving from beautiful Prague. The Queen dies. I think this gives us hope, right? You just have to wait long enough. Eventually, you're gonna pass episode. Wow, that's the. There are a lot of talks. EU accession. Macron proposes the European political community. I didn't hear about this idea in the last year again, but we cannot let them enter because we have veto, so we cannot have Albania and Greece taking decisions together because it's not going to happen. So we find a way to give them some maybe support for infrastructure, but still not full membership. But there is a lot of talk about this EPC. Giorgia Meloni becomes Prime Minister of Italy. There is a lot of waiting because we don't know exactly how she's going to behave. And let's say, after all, she behaved much better than most of us expected. Maybe at the beginning she was taught some lessons quickly. And that's how it goes. Finally, we find a way to decide, okay, you're a member of a club. The club have very basic values. Once you enter the club, you promise you respect them. The moment you stop respecting these values, what can we do to retaliate? And we can pool some funds for a while, and at least making it harder for you to misuse them. Great achievement. So it was the most expensive PP break in the history of the council when he was asked, okay, we have to take a decision. Go to the bathroom so we can vote, and there is no veto. And that Qatar Gate is how we finished the year. Some corruption, this time is on the side of S&D. Lot of investigation, Belgian police, bags of cash. Cool moment. All right, you're still all fine, all awake, that's very nice. Croatia joining Schengen and the Euro. Beautiful moment. Limbo. For me also 2023, is the day I started finally interviewing commissioner, and I started with Vestager, who is honestly, an amazing person, and this kind of politician that gives you hope. Okay, they are not only trying to steal money, like there is really somebody that cares and has a vision and has power and determination to make it happen. So, digital single market, another achievement. We try to regulate it even before it exists, but it's still beautiful. And it's I don't know if you like the IT crowd, but that's a quote. Yeah, the nerds are laughing. Pet Pavel, the new cool president of the Czech Republic. I mean, honestly, the man is handsome even for straight people. Just saying, like, he brings, new reason to hope. Former NATO general, so somebody really. Somebody really cool to meet, and of course I managed to stalk him as well in Ostrava, where I was giving a speech, and I showed him the memes, and he was like, "What? Oh, that's funny." And then his wife was also looking at the, so, "But that's you." I said, "Yeah." It's like, really, really cute. That's for the Italians. I don't know. This is the EU special envoy to the Persian Gulf countries, something like this, former Italian politician. So October 2023, the war in Israel and Palestine starts again with violence. As usual, tragedy, we know, and far from us, but still. Yeah. Finland has a new president, former College of Europe as well. I meet Dombrovskis, sorry, I had to put this slide because, yes, because he was laughing at the meme, and all his cabinet was laughing at the meme, so it's all right. Robert Fico wins the elections in Slovakia. I let you imagine who Draco Malfoy is. Well, what can we do? Good news on the other side, to balance. the caption is from Marco Bresolin. We finally approach the year of world elections, where more than 50% of the world population had to vote in elections. 2024, getting closer. We're still wondering, should we use Spitzenkandidaten for the elections, or maybe is it a joke? I don't know. We tried anyway. Dune 2 is released in cinemas. Mario Draghi is drafted to please help us, creating an industrial plan. Finally, Hungary lets Sweden join NATO. You should know that according to many Swedish friends, so they're really often confused with Switzerland because it sounds the same. Actually, remember there was a CNN map of Europe where they swapped the two. So yeah, apparently it happens very, very often. We lose Zuzka Čaputova. She's not president of Slovakia anymore. We have Pellegrini instead, also big friend of Fico. They were actually in the same party before. Still, the EU elections are in motion. Nothing can stop them. We have like Metsola in one day, like she was in 3 different countries talking at different channels. I was like, wow, how do they manage the schedule? So she was like really knocking every door on every radio, and that's the passion we need to make Europe known among member states. I think the method of motivation is important in Brussels because every morning, we go to work and we know things are slow and we wonder, am I really making any kind of impact here? And it is important, especially in winter when we're all a bit depressed, to remember that, yes, there is still some good in the EU and it's worth fighting for it. So let's not lose our motivation because otherwise the evil empire wins. Yes. Finally, it's over. The presidency of Charles Michel is over. They separate. I can't wait for the Netflix series about them. If they need any writer, they can contact me. The season of whispers begins. And I don't know about you, but that's my favorite period in EU politics. It's like when you hear a rumor and then the cabinet makes you believe that something is happening, and then there is a name made, and then they pretend they don't know it. It's like, it's very beautiful, and it's so complex, the complexity. And we know that nobody in this room has a complete idea of what happens in those days, and still, in the end, it produces results. Kaja Kallas becomes HRVP, and that's a great thing for Estonia and for European Union, I think. Here, Joe Biden on the other side of the Atlantic decides to resign. He's not running for presidency anymore. That's also how democracy works. Other countries don't have the pleasure to experience that. We know who won the elections. Let's not remember it. It's not only Italy having government crisis. Germany has also some government crisis. This is the Minister of Economics who was kicked out of government. And let's see what is going to happen with his future job. We reach 1,000 years of war in Ukraine. And we are tired. Imagine how Ukraine is tired. Again, it's good. We should support them more. I'm very glad that we went from Ukraine should not lose the war to Ukraine should win the war. I think, from my point of view, it's interesting paradigm shift. We should avoid repeating the same mistakes and really show our support to Georgia. I admire there have been a few politicians, EU politicians or national politicians that even flew to Georgia to try to show at least some moral support to the people there. And as I have many friends there, it's really like painful what is happening. We are almost done with the college. I remember it was a Monday morning, when you're like, today we're gonna find out the names, it's gonna be fine. And then, there was still little adjustment to be done. Finally, everything goes well. Von der Leyen gets her second presidency of the European Commission. Very thin majority, but still, it's a majority. And try to make everybody agree. 500 million people, not easy. So we have the Wonder Team here, and this was a very unsuccessful meme. It took me like 5 hours to prepare it. It's like probably a meme I worked a lot about. It's probably too complicated, but I thought it was still a nice way to present the team, better than the PowerPoint they used. And Dombrovskis is number 10, so that's also quite funny. Good, we're almost at the end. I suppose most of you are hungry. Me too. 2025, it just began. I think we saw that with a bit of willing we can face almost everything. So there is a positive note to this presentation. We talked briefly about the priorities, what we should worry about. Environment, for sure, guys. In the long term, it's really, really bad. And it should remain a focus of discussion and possibly of meaningful laws. Defense, very important. And especially in the room, there will be communicators for sure. So it's important to communicate that EU army doesn't mean that we create a lot of soldiers and that everybody will be drafted, but just that there is a centralized, chain of command that allows us to react quickly if there are troubles. So that's very important detail, because the enemies will pretend, you won the Nobel Prize for peace, and now you want to build an army. Yes, because it's needed. Unfortunately, in this world, we have to be careful with which people we share intelligence. Industry is also important, obviously. More important than environment? Probably not. Draghi wrote this report. We hope it is followed. We hope it has an impact. Last point, enlargement. Yes. Eventually, we have to decide, are we a real serious geopolitical player that takes decisions that change the course of events, or are we just waiting to see what the others are doing? Yeah, it's time to act and decide. As you know, I care about communication. So the last 4 slides if we want to achieve anything of this, if we want to recover from the democratic deficit that the European Union has, if we want to make our work more relatable and fun, we need a better communication. And it's not hard. You just, ask people. Like, I know most of you passed EPSO. Can you tell me how much is this part of the pie worth? I have no idea. Every time I look at the graph, I think I have it, but then no, like if we publish a graph, make it easy. People have to understand it. You cannot waste 10 minutes to figure out what it means. You use social media. For fuck's sake, putting a screenshot of a table in a tweet is not a good idea. I know nobody cares about, the commissioner hearing, but still we want to pretend it's cool. It's still cool that they have to get the approval of the parliament, and maybe some people discover something they didn't know. If we communicate properly, if we tag them, if we put pictures, if we put easy headlines. So again, communication is vital. It's not something we can say, but it's just communication. We have to do it properly. Otherwise, yes, it's going to be hard to be understood, and we need people to understand what we are doing here. Otherwise, what we are doing here will become irrelevant, and we cannot allow that. So that's enough. I hope you had fun. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. All right.